Welcome everyone to this webinar for MTM Critical Minerals, ASX code, not unsurprisingly, MTM. Shortly, I will introduce Managing Director Lachlan Reynolds, who will provide an update on the company's strategy, the current exploration program for rare earth element deposits at its projects in Canada and Western Australia, and future work plans. Following the formal update, you will have the opportunity to ask questions of Lachlan during our Q&A session. So as the presentation is occurring, think about the questions you would like to have asked and submit them using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I will put them to Lachlan directly during the Q&A session. Okay, let's get started. I would now like to introduce MTM Critical Minerals Managing Director, Lachlan Reynolds, who will give you your formal presentation, and then we'll stand by at the end to answer any questions you may have. Lachlan, over to you.
Thank you, David. Good morning or afternoon to viewers. Thank you very much for your interest in MTM Critical Metals. I hope this webinar provides you with some information about the company and gives you perhaps a reason to look at us further as an investment. Next slide, please. Obligatory disclaimers for you to read at your leisure. Thank you. Look, to recent highlights. The company has been very busy over the last 6 months or so. The most important things that we have achieved recently is signing an option to acquire an advanced exploration project in Quebec in Canada. This is the Pomme rare earth element and niobium project, which is a highly geologically prospective target for us in a premium location, and it has some historical work that gives us great hope that we can go on with a work program that will help us discover a new resource of rare earths and niobium. Diamond drilling is due to start there very, very soon. In fact, I'm waiting on information that the rig has mobilised within the next day or two. The second part of this update is that we've recently completed a major drilling program at our East Laverton project here in Western Australia. Once again, we've been focused on a large clay-hosted rare earth style of mineralisation. The drilling has confirmed that we have very broad areas of this style of mineralisation, and we've received some excellent results in terms of the grade, which again gives us encouragement that there could well be a resource or resources to be defined on that project area. During the drilling there, we also have discovered what I think can be a new nickel laterite discovery. That has been part of the broader regional exploration program and gives another string to our bow as far as a critical metals company. Finally, a couple of other points is that we've raised $3 million just a couple of months ago. This is going to allow us to work on all of our projects without any issues regarding funding, and we're going to be looking to utilise that funding very effectively in the ground in the pursuit of new mineral discoveries. Then finally, you may have known us previously as Mount Monger Resources Limited. We have gone through a name change. We think it is a better reflection of our corporate strategy, and I look forward to just taking you through those projects and our program over the next set of slides. So next slide, please. So first to start on the Pomme project, which, as I said, is a carbonatite rare earth and niobium project in Quebec, in Canada. This project was secured after a fairly rigorous due diligence program showed that it had real geological potential to host a resource. There is some historical drilling there with some very significant diamond drilling intersections, which are shown on the screen. You can see that those were over lengths in excess of 500 metres, and locally the grades were certainly at a resource level. So we are looking to this project, as I said, commencing drilling very, very soon to test for, essentially to try and discover a new resource. We're very confident geologically because it is so close to a known rare earth and niobium deposit. That is the Montviel deposit, which has a resource, as you can see there, of about 266 million tonnes at 1.5% total rare earths and a very nice niobium credit. So we have an existing team there in Canada who are working on a contract basis. We have very good relationships with the local First Nations group. All our work has been permitted and getting underway as we speak. Next slide, please. To expand a little bit more on this project, you can see on your screen a location diagram. It is a very accessible region. It's an area that is currently being logged. And so there is a network of very high quality tracks which allow us to get to the project by road. The snows have melted, the summer season is upon us. And so we're looking forward, as I said, to getting underway with that drilling and providing updates to shareholders as regularly as we possibly can. Next slide, please. Geologically, I mentioned that the Pomme project is very similar to Montviel. This map shows the situation there. The Pomme carbonatite sits in the northern part of the overall claims package, about 7 kilometres away from the known resource. The detail on the geology there is not as detailed, and that's simply a reflection of the amount of drilling that has been completed. These areas are under glacial cover, and so our work is the first real look at the geology of the carbonatite and the distribution of mineralisation within it. Next slide, please. We have also recently undertaken some magnetics. We flew that using a drone. You can see from the image on your screen that the Pomme project presents in a very similar way to the Montviel deposit. You can also see the location of the historical drill holes, which on this plan are in excess of about 1.2 kilometres apart. So we know we've got a potentially very large mineralised system. And we're excited to find the best parts of that system with this next phase of work. Next slide, please. And just to zoom in on that program in a little more detail, shown on the screen is the magnetics of the Pomme project. The interpreted outline of the carbonatite is shown in the yellow dashes. And that's a roughly circular feature about 1.5 kilometres in diameter. The yellow dots shown on that plan are the initial proposed locations of our drilling. We have permitted more than what we're currently showing. So if we get some success from this drilling, we have the flexibility to immediately start infilling on this grid. And that will be leading us towards delineation of a resource potentially in the latter part of this year. Next slide, please. Finally, as far as the Pomme project goes, I want to emphasise the importance of the emerging rare earth story in Canada. There are numerous projects that are currently at a near operation or in a feasibility stage. They are spread across Canada from west to east, but there is a concentration in Quebec and nearby in Ontario. We feel that this is a very positive climate for us to be operating within. Quebec has a long and strong history of mining. It is a well-regarded jurisdiction for exploration and mining operations. And we think it's an exceptional place for us to be investing, particularly with the ability to pick up a project with the kind of geological prospectivity that we've seen. And we think that there will be more projects to exploit as we get familiar with operating in that province. Next slide, please. I want to change gears here and talk about East Laverton. This is an emerging district scale rare earth opportunity. Our work over the last couple of years since the company was listed has involved some very regional soil sampling, which has defined a number of high priority targets for rare earth mineralisation. We've now completed a couple of phases of air core drilling, and both of those programs have identified broad zones of shallow probably sub-horizontal and broadly continuous zones of rare earth element mineralisation. As I said, I think that this is very much a district scale opportunity, and what we see is the potential to make potentially one, if not more, discoveries of viable rare earth resources. We're currently assessing all the results that have come in, and I'll touch on those in a slide or two. We're currently focused on also getting some metallurgical test work completed so that we can understand the kind of processing options that we would have with this mineralisation. We will be continuing to work on this project in conjunction with the work in Canada. The focus is on discovery of resources that have to be the right size, the right grade, the right metal basket in terms of the types of high value rare earth elements, and also, as I said, the processing characteristics. Next slide, please. This is an overview of our East Laverton project. You can see that the rare earth zone that we've identified is mainly up in the northern part of the tenements. However, we are seeing results from drilling that indicate that rare earths could be much more widespread. So our eyes are open for that opportunity. We have a large ground holding here of about 3,500 square kilometres. Where we've recognised obviously the rare earth potential, but we've believed right from the beginning that there was also opportunity for other elements such as nickel and gold. And so we have been prosecuting an exploration campaign to take in all those opportunities and very much a holistic approach to our exploration. It is quite greenfield. Most of the area is concealed by transported cover. But so far we've seen that we've had good results from our geochemical work and then followed up with campaigns of drilling. Now, to go into that a little bit more detail, if we can just go to the next slide, please. This slide shows an image of the surface geochemistry over our Point Kidman prospect. What is contoured up here is the total rare earths from soil sampling using the MMI technique. You can see that there are a lot of red areas, and we've been very, very encouraged by both the size and the magnitude of the rare earth element anomalies. And then as we've followed up each of these areas with drilling, we have seen mineralisation sitting within the weathering profile, principally within the clay zones of the regolith, and that is our principal rare earth target. We haven't been able to get to all of the areas yet. There is a program of heritage clearance that has to be undertaken, and we're also very keen to expand the coverage of our soil geochemistry in the expectation that it will generate additional new targets, which we will then go on to test with further drilling. At this stage, it's all primarily air core drilling, and it's cheap, it's fast. We're certainly getting good bang for our buck as far as our drilling dollar. And as I said previously, our intention here is to delineate areas, hopefully more than one, that could potentially host a rare earth element resource. Next slide, please. This is a couple of cross sections from our recent drilling, which was reported just last week. You can see what's represented here in the red zone is the broad, roughly sub-horizontal zones of rare earth element mineralisation with some of the key grades shown on those sections. Please note that the vertical exaggeration on these is 10 times. So we're looking at very, very broad areas that have a generally fairly consistent zone of mineralisation. That certainly gives us great hope that there is an opportunity to build fairly substantial resources in terms of the tonnage, and the grades, as you can see, are quite comparable with other rare earth projects that are emerging in Western Australia. Next slide, please. Finally, I'd just like to touch on the results that we had from our Seahorse Prospect, which is in the southeastern part of the East Laverton project area. This is a location where we've recently announced the discovery of a nickel laterite deposit. That has been as a consequence of doing some drilling to test, once again, surface geochemical anomalies, in this case associated with quite a clear magnetic anomaly that we believe is due to an underlying ultramafic unit. The air core drilling that we've done has identified numerous zones of significant width and certainly significant nickel grade, along with cobalt and chrome mineralisation, very typical of what we see associated with the Western Australian nickel laterites. And I think with further investigation, there is certainly potential there to extend our drilling along strike and to test that ultramafic unit further. And we expect that we will be able to build a fairly substantial resource of lateritic nickel mineralisation from that work. Next slide, please. And I have both a long section and a cross section resulting from that drilling, again showing fairly consistent widths of nickel mineralisation around the 1% mark. That is associated with the ultramafic unit that we've now identified and interpreted from the magnetics. This is interesting in its own right, but it also gives us a great deal of encouragement that the East Laverton area is prospective for other types of mineralisation aside from the rare earths. And it obviously gives us another string to our exploration bow as we go forward with this project. Next slide, please. I'm just mapping out our proposed exploration program. Our focus is very definitely on drilling for discovery in both Western Australia and Canada. And I think that you'll, based on what I've just told you, I think you'll agree that we have a great deal of prospectivity in both of those areas. At the Pomme rare earth and niobium project in Canada, drilling is commencing imminently. There is a summer fieldwork campaign that will be undertaken at the same time. And as we generate new drill core, we'll be looking to do metallurgical test work on that deposit to start looking at a potential process flow. We are being guided by the results of the nearby Montviel deposit, and we understand that the mineralogy is likely to be very similar. So we certainly have an enormous step up in terms of our ability to tailor a metallurgical test work to evaluate any mineralisation we see from that project. I do think that there is an opportunity for us potentially to get to a resource within a year's time. There will need to be additional drilling. However, the mineralisation is visible in the drill core. We will get very good rapid feedback about whether we're finding zones of significant mineralisation. So we should have an opportunity to both accelerate and infill our drilling as we see results emerging from that Canadian project. At East Laverton, we have some work to do to assess our existing drilling results. As I said, we are also undertaking a metallurgical test work program there that will commence in the very near future. We have more soil sampling to do. We're progressing our work with the local native title claimants to get more heritage clearances done, and there will be further drilling programs to be completed in the latter part of this year. I'm also hopeful that that's an area where we can advance to a resource relatively quickly. And really that takes us as far as our proposed exploration program. Just a note on our strategy. I've obviously emphasised our attention to the rare earth elements. It is part of a planned strategic change for the company. We believe that this sector is one that will grow as there is the continued energy revolution, which is correlating with the minerals revolution. And we see a long-term demand for the rare earth elements, and certainly increased demand and increased price into the future. So we think that we've positioned the company in a good sector and we have strong projects to support that strategy. Next slide, please. Finally, just a quick note on our current capital structure, and this includes the capital that's been raised recently. We currently have about 100 million shares on issue, and about half that number in terms of options. Our market capitalisation currently sitting only around 12 million, but with $3 million cash, as I said, to prosecute our exploration programs. Board and management are well vested in terms of the success of this company. The top 20 hold about a third of the total shares available. So I can assure listeners that we are working hard to increase the value in the company, and we think we have the right ingredients to do that. Next slide, please. Finally, just a note on the management team. We have a fairly small board of directors. John Hannaford is my chairman, David Izzard, fellow non-exec, myself, and I'm well supported by a very experienced CFO and exploration manager. And then because of the way that we're in a shared office environment, we do have access to some other fellows in our office who have a lot of combined both metallurgical and rare earth expertise. So again, we're well positioned to make good technical and financial decisions regarding the future of MTM. Next slide, please. Finally, just statements there for your consideration. These are all available on our website. Next slide, please. And finally, our contact details and my opportunity to thank you for tuning in. Once again, I do appreciate your interest in the company.
Thanks, Lachlan. A great presentation and has clearly generated interest in terms of questions. So we'll jump right into that. Just to remind everyone, if you do have a question that you would like to put to Lachlan, submit it via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. I will put the question across. If we run out of time and can't get to all the questions, we will make sure they're put directly to the company, and I suspect and expect that they will be answered directly to you after the webinar. So let's just start with Quebec and the amount of Australians operating there, both for rare earth and lithium. What do you think the reason is that's drawn all these Australian companies to that part of Canada, and how much does their activity impact and influence decisions you make around your own exploration programs?
Yes, okay. So the interest in Quebec and neighbouring Ontario for lithium has been going on for some time, and it's been driven by prospectivity largely. I think Australian companies have recognised both the geological opportunity in that part of the world. They've also been able to acquire high quality projects for far less than the same projects would command here in Australia. So it's a combination of those things. It's really the opportunity, both geologically and also the commercially, just the ability to operate there. So that they're a little ahead of the rare earth sector by virtue of being active for the last couple of years. However, the rare earth sector is catching up. There are now a number of companies that are looking at Canada as for the same reasons, basically, for the geological opportunity and for the ability to obtain ground at a reasonable cost. Canada, of course, is a great operating jurisdiction. They have a very long mining history. They have a good regulatory environment, and it's very similar to the way that we operate in Australia. So I think people are comfortable operating in Canada. In many ways, the ASX is giving Australian companies far more recognition for the quality of the projects than many companies on the TSX are receiving. And my experience recently, having been at the PDAC in Toronto, was that many Canadian companies were looking quite jealously at what kind of recognition Australian companies were getting for their work in Canada. So It's currently a great place and good environment and good jurisdiction to be working in.
And just sort of touching on the second part of the question, so activity in and around where companies are located generally helps in the decision-making process. And the question that was put forward was, is it important to watch what others do? Does that then give you some insights into what you should or could be doing?
I think that is certainly true to an extent. Geologically, the lithium targets, for instance, have very little relevance to the rare earths. Geologically, they're quite distinct. However, it all contributes to a sense of positivity. There is investor recognition both in Canada and in Australia. The Canadians, like Australia, have also implemented critical mineral strategies, and so there is a lot of emphasis going on supporting companies. And so the more who are getting active in that sector, I think it's a bit of a self-generating interest. So yes, we're trying to stay aware of what our neighbours are doing. There's also opportunities that are going to arise for us out of that process. But at the same time, we have a job to do on our own project. We see that the primary driver for MTM is to make that discovery and increase the value proposition of the company. And ultimately, because we're so close to an existing resource at our Pomme project, we look forward to being potentially part of a much larger developmental opportunity. So short answer to your question is yes, we pay attention. There are things to learn. But ultimately we do have a job to do, and we're pretty focused on that.
So just drilling in, if you like, into the Pomme project, how did the acquisition come about? Was it, were you, and the question's pretty direct, were you approached, or were you scouring sort of the area looking for opportunities, or was it a mixture of both?
It was a mixture of both. We were actively looking worldwide. Canada was certainly a preferred jurisdiction to be operating in. Ultimately, the Pomme project did come to us through a third party who had been negotiating with the claim holder. Once when it was presented to us, I come from a very technical background. I did a very deep technical due diligence dive on the project, and I liked what I saw. There was very little about the project which concerned me, both in terms of the geology, the known geology, its location, and then everything else associated with the project stacked up in terms of the logistics, the access to mining infrastructure. It all came together in a very neat package. And we are continuing to work closely with the vendor who continues to hold the Montfield deposit. And we are in fact utilising some of their experienced technical staff to assist us with this drilling program. So we continue to look for additional projects both in Quebec and beyond. And it will continue to be a process that is driven by the technical opportunity first and foremost for us.
Still on the Pomme project, so there's a question here that talks to the fact that you clearly have the funds to do the amount of work and the spend commitment to acquire that project as sort of contemplated under the terms.
Yes.
What we're seeing elsewhere in Canada is companies sort of accelerating that opportunity to be able to acquire and then, essentially hold their own destiny in their hands. Do you think that's something that the board may consider is given the funds that are available to you, that you may look to actually accelerate the acquisition?
Yes, absolutely. And for a bit of background for listeners, the terms of that deal required about $3 million of combined cash and share expenditure, and $2 million of that cost was money that was directly into the ground. So we think that the project, the acquisition was very well structured for money going into the ground as the principal requirement. And that's exactly what we're doing with this first drilling program, which will take us a long way down the track in terms of meeting our expenditure commitments. We think that good results from the first phase of drilling could easily allow us to accelerate the program. There would be no issue with increasing the size of the team on the ground and putting additional drill rigs in. And if we needed to raise funding on that basis, then I think the results of the work would speak for itself. And we're also very keen to look at the flow-through share scheme that the Canadians have, which provides for a very generous tax incentive that would potentially allow us to raise further capital at a significant premium to our share price. Yes, not only is the board willing to consider accelerating the program, we are in fact primed to do that if we start to see some encouraging results.
Clearly, this project's grabbed a lot of attention because there's lots and lots of questions coming through. Do you think there, and you did touch on it briefly, do you think there's an opportunity to work with the vendor to look to acquire further ground outside of the existing assets held in your control?
Look, I do. I can't speak for the vendor's intentions, obviously. They are very much concentrating on things like recycling of rare earths and also novel processing technologies to recover rare earths from different types of deposits and mining residues. So they are very much a processing technology company, and they hold Montreal as a strategic asset that their technology could be applied to potentially in the future. And they are undergoing a process of optimization of their metallurgical process for that deposit. And that's actually something that's being supported by the Quebec government. And I think ultimately there is a real opportunity for us to work with them as part of a much larger project development. And obviously that would be clearly on our minds if we are able to delineate a resource at Pomme as well. It would not make a great deal of sense to consider the two deposits in isolation. They will very much build on a bigger local picture.
I'm going to have to read this one out as written because I don't want to mess it up. Can you talk to the recent drone survey at Pomme and how these results have guided this up-and-coming drill program? Curious is the point made if this is comparable to Montreal's geology.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. We undertook the drone magnetics because we felt that it would be a useful addition to the overall geophysical coverage that we had of the project. It is not something that we've utilised a great deal in terms of planning the drilling, but what it will become useful for, potentially very useful, will be as the drilling progresses. We will be in a position to correlate the geology that we see in the drilling with the geophysical responses. Now, my hope is that as we evolve in terms of our understanding of the geology, that we will be able to use that magnetics and potentially other geophysical techniques as well to help identify the most prospective parts of the overall carbonatite intrusion. The actual resource footprint is relatively small, and certainly a deposit the size of Montreal could easily fit within the Pomme carbonatite as interpreted. But at this stage, we simply don't have enough information about the geology of the carbonatite to understand which parts are going to be the most prospective. And that's why we're undertaking a fairly comprehensive program of drilling in the first instance.
Turning our attention quickly, we do have a couple more minutes for questions. Turning our attention to East Laverton and the tenement package you have there. Prospective for a range of commodities. What's the immediate focus and how significant was the discovery of the laterite nickel within this tenement package?
Well, the The East Laverton package was picked up as part of our IPO. At the time, we were concentrating on gold. We knew that there was potential to find a Tropicana style or a Gruyere style of mineralisation in remnant greenstone inliers within that tenement package. Along with that went certainly a recognition that there could be nickel targets as well. The rare earths, however, have emerged as the most immediate target. And that is what we're concentrating on in the short term. The nickel discovery is really icing on the cake. We think that could have significant size potential, and we are not an insignificant distance away from the Murrin laterite operations. So there are possible strategic options for us there. I think that we will continue to concentrate on the rare earths in the short term, but I'm keen to get an overall idea of what resource potential there is for the nickel. Bear in mind, it is at this stage it's a nickel laterite, and we think that there is it would be worthwhile to put some more exploration into trying to determine if there is any sulfide hosted nickel associated with that ultramafic unit as well. So the work will continue to focus on the rare earths. We will continue to investigate the resource potential for the nickel. We will also continue to test other targets on an opportunistic basis as our exploration program continues on that project area.
Well funded, a strong portfolio of assets that are clearly going to keep you busy, but will also generate significant news flow over the coming months ahead. A company we'll certainly keep an eye on, and hopefully those watching will put on the watch list and keep an eye on. Generate a lot of questions, so there must be a lot of interest. Fantastic presentation. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. A copy will be available on the company website over the next 24 hours. But Lachlan, thanks for a great presentation. And thanks.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great opportunity for me to get the story out to more investors.
And thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a great day, and put the MTM stock on your watch list and just see how the news flow develops. Lachlan, thanks for your time, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, David.